Have you ever wondered what the instruction manual for an ancient society looked like? Well, we're about to crack one open. This is basically a 3,000-year-old blueprint for a community, and it gets into everything: membership, public health, even economic ethics. So let's get into it.
You know, this question is really what this is all about. We're not getting bogged down in abstract theology here. Instead, we're looking at a surprisingly practical guide for daily life. It gets into the real nitty-gritty: who's in, who's out, how to keep the community safe, and what it really means to be a good neighbor.
Okay, so first things first, how did this community even define itself? Look, every group has rules for membership, right? But this one was incredibly specific, and it created some really clear boundaries for who is considered in the assembly.
Right off the bat, what's so striking is the focus on physical wholeness and on your family line. The text literally excludes people based on specific physical conditions and their ancestry. What this meant was that your body and your family tree were what determined your place in the community. It was a difference between being inside the gates or being left outside.
And the rules get even more detailed when you look at how they treated their neighbors. And this is where you can see that collective memory played a huge role. On one hand, you have the Ammonites and Moabites. They were facing a long-term ban. And the reason given, well, they were hostile during Israel's early history. But then you look at the Edomites and Egyptians, and they were treated way more leniently. And the reasons are just as specific. One group was considered family, and with the other, there was a shared, even if it was a difficult, history.
So let's shift gears a bit. Beyond just defining its people, this text was really concerned with defining its space. This next part is all about purity, especially inside a military camp, where that link between being physically clean and being spiritually ready was seen as absolutely crucial.
And this wasn't just some vague idea, It was a very clear four-step process. If someone became ritually unclean, say by coming into contact with something considered impure, they had to follow this exact procedure. Physically leave the camp, wait it out, wash up, and only then could they come back at a very specific time. It was this structured system designed to contain anything impure and restore the community.
Okay, now this might be one of the earliest public sanitation laws ever written down. Seriously. The text says you need a designated bathroom area outside the camp, and it even tells people to carry a little shovel to bury their waste. I mean, that's just incredibly practical public health advice. But the reason they give for it isn't just about hygiene, and that's what makes this so fascinating.
And here it is. This is the whole point. This rule wasn't just to stop diseases from spreading. It was theological. The camp had to be kept holy because God's presence was believed to literally be walking around in it. So physical cleanliness was a direct requirement for the divine. A totally mundane act like basic hygiene was suddenly elevated into an act of spiritual maintenance. Wow.
So now we're going to pivot from rules about people and places to rules about behavior. This last section is really a collection of different laws that, when you put them all together, they sketch out a pretty clear ethical framework for how people were supposed to act with each other, both socially and economically.
First up is this remarkable rule about escaped slaves. I mean, think about it. In a world where most laws would demand you return a slave to their master, this text does the exact opposite. It says that a slave who's seeking refuge must not be sent back. Instead, they had to be protected, allowed to live freely wherever they wanted, and shielded from oppression. It's just this powerful statement of sanctuary.
Next, the text draws a really hard line around the holiness of worship. It actually forbids using money earned from shrine prostitution to fulfill a religious promise. This rule basically separates certain economic activities from religious life. It's saying that where an offering comes from matters just as much as the offering itself. The economic laws also get into lending. It was forbidden to charge interest to a fellow Israelite, which was a clear way to prevent people inside the community from getting trapped in debt. But the rule was different for foreigners. This whole in-group versus out-group distinction is a theme you see again and again, and it was designed to create a sense of economic solidarity.
Integrity is another huge theme here. The text is crystal clear. Your word is your bond, especially if you're making a vow to God. It literally says it's better to not make a promise at all than to make one and then break it. The focus is really on the absolute seriousness of your words.
And finally, we see this really delicate balance between helping someone in need and respecting private property. You could walk through your neighbor's field and eat your fill right there on the spot. But you couldn't bring a basket, you couldn't bring a sickle. It's a provision for immediate hunger that still respects the owner's right to their harvest. It's kind of like a system of managed compassion.
So, after looking at all these different rules, from citizenship to sanitation to finance, what does this whole blueprint actually tell us? What's the big picture here?
Well, when you zoom out, all these individual laws start to show a set of core values. They show a society that cared deeply about community and identity, drawing really clear lines about who belonged. They connected holiness and purity in a very real physical way. They legislated for compassion and justice, especially for the vulnerable. And they demanded economic fairness and integrity from their own members. See, these weren't just random rules. They were the pillars of a complete worldview.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thought. This ancient text shows us that the little rules, the ones about where you go to the bathroom or how you borrow money, can reveal just as much about a culture's soul as its biggest, grandest laws. So the question for us is, what do our own rules, the written ones and the unwritten ones, say about what we truly value today?